Have you ever felt like someone was quietly pulling the strings of your emotions, guiding your thoughts, your choices, your reactions, without you even realizing it? That unsettling feeling, that sudden doubt about your own decisions, is not an accident, it's manipulation. And it's far more common than most people dare to admit. The truth is, manipulation isn't always loud or obvious. It can be soft, subtle, hidden behind charm, authority, or even love. And if you don't learn to recognize it, it can shape your life without your permission. We live in a world overflowing with influence. Every day, you're surrounded by voices trying to mold your beliefs, steer your desires, and quietly direct your actions. Some do it for profit, some for control, and some simply because they can. It starts small, a suggestion here, a tone of voice there, until you begin to question your own instincts. You stop trusting your inner voice. You second-guess your worth, your dreams, your path. And that's exactly how manipulation wins. Not by overpowering you, but by convincing you to surrender voluntarily. But there's something powerful they don't expect. Awareness. The moment you begin to see manipulation for what it is, the moment you realize how influence works, the game changes. You are no longer a pawn. You become a player. You start to see through the illusions, through the words that once disarmed you. You begin to stand taller, think clearer, and act with intention. That's the first step toward freedom, not from others, but from the invisible control that has lived in your mind for too long. Every manipulator depends on one thing, your unconscious reactions. They rely on your need for approval, your fear of rejection, your hunger for belonging. They twist those emotions to shape your behavior. But once you become conscious of those triggers, once you learn to pause before reacting, their power begins to fade. You realize that you are not weak for being influenced, you are simply unaware. And now, awareness becomes your greatest weapon. Stay with me, because in this journey, you'll discover how the greatest manipulators operate, not to imitate them, but to understand how to disarm them. You'll learn how to build emotional armor that doesn't make you cold, but clear. You'll learn to protect your peace without losing your compassion. You'll see how discipline, self-awareness, and inner stillness, the same principles taught by masters like Heng, can give you the strength to walk through manipulation untouched. There's no greater power than seeing what others can't. No greater freedom than thinking for yourself in a world that constantly tells you what to think. When you understand manipulation, you begin to understand yourself, your fears, your desires, your hidden weaknesses, and that understanding transforms you. You stop being reactive and start being deliberate. You stop chasing validation and start building truth. You stop living by others' expectations and start living by purpose. So, if you've ever been lied to, misled, or underestimated, this is your moment to reclaim control. Not through anger, not through resistance, but through clarity. Stay until the end, because the tactics you're about to learn are not just psychological tools. They are keys to unlocking emotional freedom. This isn't about becoming harder, it's about becoming wiser, stronger, untouchable. The kind of person who cannot be swayed because they've learned to see through the fog of manipulation and stand firm in their own light. The moment you start seeing through manipulation, you realize something profound. It was never just about other people. It was about the silent battles inside you. The truth is, manipulation only takes root where uncertainty lives. When you doubt your worth, when you question your intuition, when you crave recognition from others more than trust in yourself, you leave the door open. And those who understand human emotion will always sense it. They will sense your hesitation, your need to please, your longing to be accepted. And they will use it. Not always out of cruelty, but because influence is power, and power tempts even the well-intentioned. But once you begin to see those invisible patterns, you reclaim something sacred, your awareness. Awareness doesn't just reveal what others are doing, it exposes what's been hidden in you, the fears, the insecurities, the deep desire to be seen and loved. When you confront those emotions instead of running from them, you become immune to the manipulation built upon them. You start to understand that the most dangerous form of control is not what people do to you, but what your own mind convinces you to believe. Think about it. How often have you said yes when your heart screamed no? How often have you played small to keep the peace? How many times have you silenced your truth just to avoid judgment? Every time you do, a piece of your strength slips away. Manipulation thrives not in confrontation, but in silence. The silence of those who know they're being controlled, yet fear standing firm. The silence that says, I'll endure this just to keep things calm. But peace that demands your submission is not peace, it's surrender. And that surrender is what every manipulator depends on. The antidote is clarity, the calm, unshakable knowing of who you are and what you stand for. When you hold that kind of clarity, you no longer need to argue or prove yourself. You simply move with certainty. You no longer react impulsively to words meant to provoke you, because you can see the intent behind them. You begin to understand that true strength doesn't shout, it observes, it listens, it waits, and then it chooses its response with precision. That's where transformation begins, not by fighting against manipulation, but by mastering the self, by watching your thoughts the way a warrior watches the horizon for movement, by training your emotions to respond, not react. The manipulator thrives on emotional chaos, but your power lies in inner stillness. When you are centered, they lose control, because there is nothing left to exploit, no trigger to press, no weakness to twist. This is the essence of mental discipline, to move through life without being enslaved by external forces. To see words as they are, not as weapons. To see emotions as messages, not commands. That's the path of awareness that teachers like Heng speak of. Not detachment from the world, but mastery within it. As you awaken to this truth, you start to feel a shift inside. Confidence replaces confusion. Calm replaces chaos. You begin to trust your intuition again. You begin to recognize when someone's words are designed to shape your emotions rather than honor them. And you stop chasing approval, because you finally see the difference between connection and control. You are not here to be molded. You are here to awaken, to rise above the noise of manipulation and stand in the clarity of your own being. Every moment of awareness is a victory. Every time you pause before reacting, you take back your power. And that power, once reclaimed, is something no one can ever take from you again. The deeper you look into manipulation, the more you begin to see how it feeds on emotional dependency. The world trains you to believe that your value comes from others, from how much they approve, love, or validate you, from how often they agree with you or praise what you do. This dependence becomes the perfect foundation for control, because the moment someone holds the key to your emotional peace, they hold power over your mind. They don't need to shout or demand. All they need to do is withdraw affection, withhold approval, or question your worth, and suddenly you bend yourself to win it back. That's how subtle the chain becomes. Invisible, but heavy enough to control your spirit. True freedom begins when you break that chain, when you realize that your worth was never meant to be negotiated. You are not here to earn permission to exist. You are not here to perform for acceptance. The moment you stop depending on external validation, manipulation loses its grip. Because the one thing that cannot be controlled is a person who no longer needs to be controlled. The one who stands secure in self-respect cannot be moved by guilt, flattery, or fear. You have to understand that manipulators study your emotions more deeply than you do. They sense your patterns, your triggers, your insecurities, your soft spots, and they mirror what you crave. They become what you want to see. They say what you long to hear. They offer what you secretly hope someone will give you. It feels safe, it feels right, it feels familiar. But it's a reflection designed to bind you, not free you. They know that humans are loyal to comfort, even when that comfort costs them their independence. This is why self-awareness isn't a luxury, it's survival. To be aware of your emotional needs is to guard them. To understand your triggers is to disarm them. You start to recognize when praise feels more like bait than sincerity, when attention feels more like a hook than affection. You begin to see that manipulation often comes wrapped in kindness, and that realization, though painful, becomes liberating. Because it's not about becoming cynical, it's about becoming wise. The moment you stop chasing approval, you start attracting respect. When you no longer seek validation, people can no longer use it as a weapon. Your relationships evolve, your conversations deepen. You stop over-explaining yourself to those who have already decided not to understand you. You stop fighting for space in places that were never meant for your growth. You start living aligned with truth, not tolerance, and that alignment builds a strength that no manipulation can penetrate. Heng teaches that mastery begins with discipline, not just of the body, but of the mind and emotion. Discipline means noticing when your peace depends on someone else's opinion and then reclaiming it. It means pausing before reacting to guilt or praise and asking, "Why does this move me so deeply?" That question alone creates distance between you and the manipulator. It breaks their rhythm. It reminds you that the final decision always belongs to you. You are meant to lead yourself, not through arrogance, but through awareness, to move through life without being tied to every whisper of approval or every glance of disapproval. When your value no longer shifts with external tides, you become unshakable. And that is the state where true control ends, because a person who needs nothing from manipulation cannot be touched by it. You become grounded, calm, unbothered, and clear. And clarity, more than anything else, is what dismantles every tactic designed to control you. When you stop being controlled by the opinions of others, something remarkable happens. The fog begins to clear. You start seeing how much of your life was built around keeping others comfortable. You notice the subtle ways you silenced yourself, diluted your truth, or softened your edges just to maintain peace that was never real. Manipulation thrives in that silence. It feeds on your hesitation, your desire to avoid conflict, your fear of being misunderstood. But the peace that comes from pretending is not peace. It's a slow erosion of self, and the world will keep taking from you until you remember who you are. The mind of a manipulator understands one thing well. People crave belonging more than truth. They know that the fear of rejection can make anyone bend. But what they don't understand is that once you awaken, once you start choosing truth over comfort, you become unstoppable. You stop living to be liked. You stop negotiating your values for acceptance. You start walking with a quiet strength that can't be faked or shaken. This is not rebellion, it's reclamation. It's the moment your spirit stops asking for permission to exist. The key to breaking manipulation lies in awareness, but also in courage. The courage to face discomfort. The courage to stand alone if necessary. The courage to sit in the silence that follows truth. Every manipulator counts on your fear of that silence. They expect you to fill it with apologies, with explanations, with surrender. But when you learn to hold that silence with composure, they lose control. You teach them that your peace cannot be disturbed by pressure. You show them that your worth is not up for debate. This is what mental mastery feels like. Not aggression, not dominance, but unshakable calm. The kind of calm that comes when your emotions no longer dictate your actions. It's not that you stop feeling, it's that you stop being ruled by what you feel. The manipulator thrives on your reaction. They want to see you defensive, emotional, unbalanced. But when you stay centered, their tactics collapse. Their words lose meaning because you no longer feed them your energy. You watch, you observe, and you choose how to respond. That choice, that pause, is power. Heng teaches that self-control is the highest form of strength, and silence, when used with wisdom, can become a weapon of peace. Silence doesn't mean submission, it means understanding that not every battle deserves your energy. It's realizing that the loudest truth often needs no defense. When you hold that inner stillness, you begin to radiate something rare, presence. And presence is what no manipulator can fake. It's the energy of someone who is grounded in truth, someone who sees through masks, someone who cannot be provoked into chaos. Every moment you practice this awareness, you sharpen your perception. You start hearing the intention behind words, not just their sound. You notice when flattery hides an agenda or when guilt is disguised as concern. And instead of reacting, you remain still, watching, understanding. That stillness terrifies manipulators because it means you've stepped out of their game. You are no longer a piece they can move. You've become the board itself, steady, silent, in control. This is the strength you build when you no longer need to be right, liked, or understood. You only need to be aligned. And alignment creates a peace so profound that manipulation cannot breathe in its presence. You become the calm in every storm, the quiet force that moves through life untouched by deception. And that is where real power begins, in the silence of a mind that finally belongs to itself. When your mind finally belongs to you, something extraordinary unfolds. The manipulator's greatest weapon, fear, begins to lose its voice. Fear has always been the silent architect of control. It's what keeps people obedient, compliant, and easy to guide. The fear of losing approval, the fear of standing alone, the fear of failing, of being misunderstood, of not being enough. These fears don't just shape how others treat you, they shape how you treat yourself. They whisper in your thoughts, guiding your choices long before anyone else needs to. But once you learn to face fear instead of obey it, manipulation loses its grip entirely. The truth is, fear thrives in avoidance. The more you run from it, the stronger it grows. Manipulators understand this deeply. They design their influence to keep you reacting to fear. Fear of consequences, fear of disapproval, fear of loss. They build invisible cages made of what-ifs. But every time you confront fear directly, you step out of that cage. You begin to realize that the fear was never about danger. It was about control. It was about keeping you small enough to be manageable. Yet within every fear is a doorway, a test meant to reveal how much of yourself you're willing to reclaim. When you stop letting fear dictate your actions, you start leading your life with intention instead of reaction. You no longer respond to guilt trips or veiled threats. You no longer allow others to make you feel responsible for their emotions. You begin to see that your compassion doesn't require your submission. You can care deeply without being controlled. You can love without losing yourself. And this balance, this calm strength, is what frightens manipulators most, because they can no longer reach you through fear once you've learned to walk through it. Heng often speaks of fear as an invitation, a signal that points toward the next level of growth. To master fear is to master the mind. When you face what you once avoided, you take back energy that's been trapped for years. The energy that was spent worrying, explaining, doubting, it all returns to you. And with it comes clarity, the kind that cuts through confusion like light breaking through fog. You start to see situations as they are, not as your fears paint them to be. You begin to act with precision, not panic. This is what evolution feels like. The slow, steady reclaiming of your emotional freedom. The understanding that pain can't be avoided, but suffering can. Pain refines you. Suffering chains you. The manipulator wants you stuck in suffering, overthinking, self-blaming, paralyzed. But awareness turns pain into strength. It transforms the energy of fear into discipline, the energy of doubt into direction. That is how you begin to transcend manipulation, not by avoiding the shadows, but by walking through them with your eyes open. You realize that courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. To feel fear fully and still move forward is the ultimate act of freedom. And once you experience that, no one can control you again. They may try to shake your peace, but they will fail, because your strength no longer depends on external conditions. It's rooted within. You've seen fear for what it truly is, a mirage meant to stop your growth. And when the mirage dissolves, all that's left is truth, quiet, powerful, and entirely yours. When truth becomes yours, clarity begins to sharpen everything around you. You start to see the difference between influence and intention, between guidance and control. What once felt confusing now becomes transparent. Words that used to stir guilt or doubt now reveal their purpose. You begin to notice how manipulation often disguises itself as care, how control hides behind the mask of concern. People will say they want what's best for you, but what they often mean is they want what's most comfortable for them. And when you finally understand that, you stop mistaking pressure for love. The greatest deception of manipulation is not in what is said, but in what it makes you believe about yourself. It convinces you that your worth is fragile, that your truth needs validation to exist. It teaches you to shrink so others can feel tall. But awareness ends that illusion, because once you see manipulation clearly, you can no longer unsee it. The spell breaks. You realize that the voice telling you to doubt yourself was never your own. It was planted there, nurtured by repetition, sustained by fear. And when you confront that voice, when you finally challenge it, you feel something shift. It's the sound of your own strength returning. Clarity doesn't just reveal others, it reveals you. You begin to see the ways you've participated in your own manipulation. The times you stayed quiet when you should have spoken. The times you settled for less just to avoid discomfort. The times you called it patience when it was really fear. These realizations may sting, but they are the beginning of freedom, because taking responsibility for your silence is the first step in reclaiming your voice. And that voice, once found, becomes impossible to suppress again. The manipulator depends on your blindness, not their brilliance. They depend on you not questioning the narrative. They depend on you valuing peace over truth. But when you begin to think critically, to question motives, to examine your own emotions before reacting, their control dissolves. It's not confrontation that breaks their hold, it's consciousness. It's the stillness to ask yourself, what is this moment really showing me? That one question turns every manipulation attempt into a lesson. You start to see the hidden motives behind words. You notice how guilt is used to gain control, how urgency is used to create compliance, how charm is used to disarm suspicion. Awareness transforms manipulation into insight. Heng teaches that wisdom is not in fighting darkness, but in understanding its nature. When you study manipulation without fear, you realize that every tactic is simply a distortion of truth. What they twist, you can straighten. What they hide, you can uncover. And that ability to see clearly while staying calm is the essence of mastery. It's not about winning against others. It's about no longer being moved by deception. You walk into every situation with your eyes open, not defensive, but aware, calm, because nothing hidden can truly harm you anymore. Clarity brings peace, but it also brings power. The kind of power that doesn't need to dominate, only to discern. When you live with that clarity, manipulation becomes noise, a faint echo that can no longer reach your center. You stop reacting from emotion and start responding from awareness. You stop being controlled by what others want you to see, because you have learned to trust your own perception. And that trust, that unshakable connection to your truth, becomes the ultimate protection. Nothing can control a mind that sees clearly, and nothing can bend a spirit that has learned to stand in its own light. Once you begin to trust your perception, you reclaim the steering wheel of your life. You are no longer driven by the forces that once guided you through fear or confusion. You stop living reactively and start moving intentionally. And with that intention comes power. Not the kind that seeks control, but the kind that radiates calm certainty. Manipulators sense that power instantly. They recognize it because it's the one thing they can't imitate. They can copy confidence, mimic kindness, and fake empathy, but they cannot replicate genuine inner stability. That kind of strength doesn't shout or demand attention. It simply exists, steady and grounded, and it makes those who depend on chaos deeply uncomfortable. When you embody that calm, you stop matching other people's energy. You no longer mirror anger with anger, guilt with guilt, or fear with fear. Instead, you respond with clarity. That confuses the manipulator, because their control relies on your reaction. Every guilt trip, every emotional twist, every false promise, all of it is designed to make you respond impulsively. But when you don't, when you take a breath and choose stillness, the pattern breaks. Silence becomes your strength. Awareness becomes your armor. You are no longer trapped in their rhythm. They are now forced to face their own reflection. This is the essence of true power, to choose your state, regardless of the environment. When you realize that your emotional balance is in your hands, no one can push you off center. The manipulator thrives on emotional instability, on your need to explain, defend, or prove. But you are learning that the one who explains the most often holds the least power. You don't need to justify truth. You don't need to beg for understanding. You only need to stand in your clarity and let your silence do the work. Heng teaches that stillness is not emptiness. It's strength in its purest form. The still mind sees more, hears more, feels more, because it's not clouded by reactivity. When you cultivate that stillness, manipulation stops being a threat and becomes a mirror reflecting the inner work you've done. Each time someone tries to sway your emotions, you see it as a test of discipline, a reminder of how far you've come. You don't resent the manipulator, you understand them. You see that their control is born from fear, from a lack of peace within themselves. And rather than absorbing that energy, you let it pass through you untouched. The more you live in this awareness, the more your world changes. You begin to attract different people, those who value honesty, not performance. You start speaking more directly, not to dominate, but to align. You stop overthinking every decision because you no longer fear making the wrong one. Even mistakes no longer hold you hostage. They become lessons, not weapons against your self-worth. And that shift, that quiet confidence, builds momentum. Manipulators lose interest in people they cannot control. They drift away when they realize your peace can't be shaken and your mind can't be bent. They seek easier targets, those who still depend on emotional validation. And you remain steady. You rise higher, not by fighting, but by no longer engaging in battles beneath your awareness. You become untouchable, not because you resist manipulation, but because you've transcended it. You are no longer moved by deception. You are moved only by purpose. That is the ultimate transformation, when your presence itself becomes the boundary, when you no longer need to protect your peace because you have become peace. The calm within you becomes your fortress. It's the mark of someone who has walked through the darkness of manipulation and emerged not bitter, but awakened, powerful, disciplined, and completely free. Freedom begins when peace is no longer something you chase, but something you carry. You stop searching for it in other people, in outcomes, in control. You realize that real peace cannot be given or taken. It must be built quietly within yourself. And when that realization anchors itself in your heart, every form of manipulation begins to lose power. Because manipulation feeds on dependency, and peace makes you independent. You no longer need someone to approve your choices, calm your fears, or tell you what's right. You have learned to be your own source of balance. That is the highest state of strength, the ability to remain whole in a world that constantly tries to divide your attention, your emotions, your spirit. When you become whole, external pressure feels different. You see how often manipulation comes dressed as urgency. Someone demands an answer now, a decision now, an emotion now. But urgency is a tool of control, a way to disarm your reason and trap you in reaction. When you are grounded, urgency loses its hold. You take your time, breathe deeply, and respond with precision. That pause terrifies manipulators because it reveals that they no longer dictate your rhythm. You move by your own timing. You act from awareness, not fear. That simple act of slowing down is rebellion against control. It's proof that your mind no longer belongs to anyone else. This stillness doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful. Power isn't noise, it's presence. It's the energy of someone who doesn't need to dominate to feel secure. The manipulator seeks control to feel powerful. You release control to become powerful. You learn that strength is not in forcing outcomes, but in trusting alignment. You trust that truth always rises, even if silence must carry it for a while. You trust that walking away from manipulation isn't weakness, it's mastery. Heng teaches that true warriors do not fight every battle. They choose their ground with wisdom. Every manipulative encounter is an invitation to choose. Will you descend into reaction or rise into awareness? The warrior chooses awareness. They don't let emotions pull them like strings. They observe, they understand, they decide. They know that reacting is easy, but responding takes mastery. And every time you choose response over reaction, you sharpen your inner discipline. You train the mind to stay calm, even when provoked. This is not about isolation, it's about discernment. You can still love deeply, still care fully, still engage with others, but now you do it consciously. You no longer attach your worth to outcomes or people. You no longer confuse compassion with compliance. You know where you end and others begin. That boundary is sacred, and it doesn't need to be defended loudly. It's expressed quietly in your energy, in your choices, in your presence. Every moment of awareness strengthens your foundation. You stop fearing manipulation because you understand it. You no longer absorb the chaos of others, you witness it. You move through life like still water, calm on the surface, powerful underneath. and those who once tried to control you begin to sense something different. They can no longer find the entry points they once exploited. They realize that you've stepped beyond reach, beyond fear, beyond influence. That is the essence of liberation. When peace becomes your natural state, not a temporary escape, you no longer chase control because you have mastered yourself. And when the self is mastered, the game of manipulation ends. What remains is quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need to prove, explain, or fight. It simply exists, unwavering, untouchable, and free. When peace becomes your natural state, you begin to see how rare it truly is. Most people are not at peace. They are simply distracted. They confuse stillness with stagnation, calm with complacency. But true peace is alive. It's alert. It's the steady flame that doesn't flicker no matter how strong the wind becomes. It's not about escaping the world, but mastering your presence within it. And the one who has mastered presence cannot be manipulated, because presence is the end of illusion. Manipulation lives in confusion, in unconsciousness, in the noise between stimulus and response. But when you are fully present, that space becomes sacred, and within that space, you choose how to move, how to think, how to live. The manipulator operates through distraction. They try to scatter your focus, divide your attention, fill your mind with noise until you forget your center. They do not need to control your body, they only need to control your perception. Because perception creates reality. Once they distort how you see yourself, you begin to act according to that distortion. That is how control begins, not with force, but with suggestion. But awareness restores perception. Awareness clears the fog. You start to recognize the subtle energy of manipulation before words are even spoken. You feel the shift, you sense the pull, and in that moment of recognition, you are already free. Heng teaches that awareness is the highest form of strength because it dissolves conflict before it begins. The aware mind doesn't fight, it observes. It doesn't resist emotion, it witnesses emotion. This witnessing state is not cold or detached. It's deeply alive. You feel everything, yet you are not consumed by what you feel. That is the mark of mastery. When others try to provoke guilt, fear, or doubt, you meet it with compassion, not resistance. You see their behavior not as an attack, but as an expression of their own pain. And that understanding keeps you untangled. You remain free not because you avoid people, but because you understand them. The manipulator cannot understand this level of awareness. They expect you to react, to defend, to explain. When you don't, they lose direction. Their tactics depend on your emotional participation. Without it, they collapse. They cannot play the game alone. And that is where your strength becomes undeniable. Not through confrontation, but through the absence of it. Your refusal to engage is not weakness, it's mastery of energy. You conserve what once was wasted on conflict and turn it inward, fueling growth, clarity, and peace. Soon, you begin to notice how differently life moves when you no longer respond to manipulation. Conversations become lighter, decisions become clearer. Your intuition strengthens because it is no longer drowned by noise. You start trusting your instincts again, that quiet voice that always knew, even when you ignored it. And the more you trust it, the sharper it becomes. It guides you away from people who drain your energy and toward those who elevate it. It helps you sense truth in a world full of masks. That is the quiet victory of awareness, not loud, not dramatic, but permanent. You evolve beyond the level where manipulation exists. You move through chaos without absorbing it, through noise without losing your rhythm. You stop seeking external safety because you have built it within. And in that inner security lies the ultimate freedom, the power to see clearly, to act wisely, and to live untouched by the invisible strings that once held you down. As awareness deepens, you begin to realize that manipulation is not limited to others. It often lives quietly within yourself. The mind can be its own greatest manipulator. It convinces you to stay small, to play safe, to delay growth in the name of comfort. It whispers doubts when courage is needed and amplifies fear when silence would suffice. It uses your memories, your mistakes, and your insecurities as tools to keep you controlled. The same tactics others use to limit you, your own mind can use to imprison you. But once you recognize this, a door opens. Because if the mind can manipulate you, it can also be trained to liberate you. The manipulative mind thrives on identification. It tells you, you are your thoughts and you believe it. But you are not your thoughts, you are the awareness that sees them. That simple realization changes everything. When you begin to observe your thoughts rather than become them, manipulation loses its inner foundation. The moment you can say, this thought is not me, you create distance between reaction and response. That distance is freedom. It's the moment you stop being a puppet of your own emotions and start becoming their master. Heng speaks often about this mastery, the art of watching your thoughts without judgment. When you observe, you disarm. Judgment fuels emotion, awareness dissolves it. Through awareness, you start to see patterns. How guilt arises when you break old expectations, how fear grows before new beginnings, how doubt appears when you're closest to transformation. The manipulative mind uses these emotions to keep you stagnant. But once you understand their rhythm, you no longer dance to their tune. You move with intention, not impulse. This inner discipline requires patience. It's not about suppressing emotion, but understanding it. You realize that every emotion carries a message. Fear says, pay attention. Guilt says, you've outgrown an old identity. Anger says, a boundary has been crossed. The manipulative mind distorts these messages, turning them into chaos. But awareness translates them back into wisdom. When you learn to listen with clarity, every emotion becomes a teacher, not a trap. The beauty of this awareness is that it restores power where it belongs, within. You no longer depend on the outer world to dictate your inner peace. You no longer need others to validate what your intuition already knows. When you become the observer of your own mind, you stop fighting shadows. You stop trying to control everything and instead start aligning with truth. And that truth brings calmness so profound that even your own thoughts begin to slow down. Soon, you notice that silence feels natural. Decisions come easier. You no longer overanalyze every word, every look, every outcome. The manipulative voice within loses volume because it cannot survive in presence. Presence is light, and manipulation is shadow. It can only exist where you're not looking. But now, you see everything clearly. You see how your mind once convinced you to doubt your worth, question your purpose, and fear your potential. And you smile, not in arrogance, but in peace, because you understand that the battle was never against others. It was always within. Mastery is not about silencing the mind, it's about no longer obeying its illusions. When you reach this point, control becomes unnecessary. You move naturally, calmly, with precision. Life flows. Choices feel effortless. The manipulative mind fades into the background, replaced by awareness that is vast, still, and free. And in that stillness, you find the most powerful truth of all. You were never trapped. You were simply unaware of how free you already were. Freedom begins when you realize that awareness is not the end of the path. It is the beginning of mastery. Awareness gives you clarity, but discipline gives you strength. Without discipline, awareness fades back into distraction. The world constantly pulls you outward, offering comfort disguised as peace, pleasure disguised as purpose. And when your mind is untrained, it follows every distraction, searching endlessly for meaning while drifting further from truth. Discipline anchors awareness. It transforms knowledge into embodiment. It's the silent force that turns understanding into reality. Heng teaches that self-discipline is not punishment, it is alignment. It is the art of choosing what strengthens you over what weakens you, moment after moment. Discipline doesn't demand perfection. It asks for presence. It's the commitment to act with awareness even when the world tempts you to forget who you are. Every time you choose focus over distraction, you strengthen your mind. Every time you choose patience over impulse, you sharpen your spirit. And with every act of conscious choice, manipulation loses ground. Because discipline eliminates the space where manipulation thrives, the space of indecision. When your actions are ruled by discipline, you become unpredictable to those who seek to control you. Manipulators rely on patterns. They study reactions, habits, weaknesses, but discipline breaks patterns. It brings stability in the face of chaos, silence in the presence of provocation. You respond instead of react. You act from principle, not pressure. The manipulator can no longer read you because you are no longer operating from emotion. You are moving from awareness guided by will. That is the most unsettling power to those who thrive on control, a human being who cannot be swayed by fear or pleasure. Discipline builds energy, but not through intensity, through consistency. A single decision made with clarity may change your day. 1,000 such decisions change your destiny. The manipulative mind, both yours and others, cannot handle consistency. It feeds on uncertainty, on your hesitation. But when your actions align with your values day after day, you become untouchable. You stop explaining yourself. You stop seeking validation. You no longer move to impress or defend. You move because it is true to you. And that truth radiates a quiet power that no form of manipulation can counterfeit. The world will always test your discipline. It will tempt you with shortcuts, provoke you with distractions, challenge you with fatigue. But the purpose of discipline is not to avoid these tests. It is to meet them with calm authority. Every time you resist manipulation, you refine your power. Every time you stay centered while chaos surrounds you, your inner strength compounds. And eventually, what once felt like effort becomes your nature. You no longer have to try to stay strong. Strength becomes your state of being. Discipline liberates you from dependence. It teaches you that freedom is not doing whatever you want. It's having the power to choose what truly matters. When you live with discipline, you don't need to prove anything. You don't chase peace, you embody it. You don't seek validation, you radiate certainty. You become a person whose silence carries authority, whose actions inspire trust, whose presence commands respect without force. That is the essence of mastery. To move through life unmanipulated, undistracted, unwavering. And that strength, born from discipline, becomes the foundation upon which all transformation stands.